The September 25th, 2017 meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoast Board of Directors is called to order. Roll call, please.
Okay. Director Warren.
Present.
Director Penrose. Present. Director Boyd.
Present.
Director Blanchard.
Here.
Director Reddick.
Here.
And Director Huber.
Here. All right, is there any public comment? Is there any public? No. These were items not on the agenda. So we will go into closed session for the items as listed on the agenda. I don't actually have to read them to say that.
Instructions.
Be 85 degrees outside, and we'd all be sitting here in long sleeve shirts and button jacket.
Yep.
Kind of like going to the Safeway. Rolling. Okay, we are convening back into open session, and I believe there is no reportable action taken. So we'll move to item 5, public comment for items not on the agenda. We have a member of the public. Okay, item 6, consent agenda. Debbie?
I'd like to pull item 6B, disbursements. I have a question.
6B. If you don't think it requires discussion, we can just do it as part of consent. If you think that may require discussion, let's hold it.
Well, I can give it a try. So I'm looking at page 26 of the packet, and it's for counsel's law firm. It's around $11,000 and some change, and I just want to make sure that we're not approving your time on the legal action with the city of Half Moon Bay.
What's in there, I don't have the invoices in front of me, but I know what's in there is going to include the time I spent on the stipulation, which has enabled Sam to continue doing business. And I think I haven't charged litigation rate for any of that time. I did file a paper in the motion to change venue. It consisted of one sentence, and I had to go to court because, despite offers of other people to help, nobody was going to go. I had to go myself.
Well, if it's mainly focused on getting the stip signed, I guess I don't have a problem with that. But.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at the invoice to see exactly what it was. I mean, that was the primary focus. There was a lot of time on that.
Is it possible we could pull that until the next meeting when you check the invoice?
I suppose
We can check it right now.
I can do it right
hold it
now.
and bring it back later in the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright.
while staff is looking for the right.
You want to just move on and we'll hold this?
Anything else on consent?
No.
All right, so
I move the consent agenda be approved as listed, leaving out item B.
is there a second?
I second.
Moved and seconded, no discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Let me mention that we just didn't approve any of the disbursements. Could we, I'd like to move approval of consent agenda B minus the vendor 0.
I have it right here.
Shall we just discuss it real quick?
Sure.
Yeah. So we had requested that the firm segregate out the work specifically related to the lawsuit, which included the stipulation. And so of the amount that you can see on there, it's listed in 2 line items. The first one is approximately $7,500. That is just general counsel advice, and including the work on the discussion with the state regarding the spill. And then the amount specifically related to the stipulation and order that the firm put together, that one it was the $4,080. So and all of it is related to exchanging emails and conversations with regards to getting everything put together back and forth regarding the stipulation. And this is for the month of August, so.
Right.
And it's conversations back and forth between Mr. Colantano and the other two agency attorneys. So that's what that is.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, the
Okay.
information, go ahead.
You've got a yes. So I move approval of consent agenda item B.
Second.
Moved and seconded. For further discussion, those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Opposed, any abstentions, motion carries.
Okay.
Now I can
You may
get
have these back. There you
I'm
go.
gonna need all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 7, old business. A, amend the contract with Bold, Hollister, Maddow, Nelson, Judson for the legal services to increase the authorized amount by $100,000 for a total contract amount not to exceed $190,000. So you still haven't picked up on the Oxford comma in the firm yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, at this point,
I will
Carl's
be,
gonna-
I will be leaving the room. The reason we had 7, I will say, the reason we had 7B is so I could actually be in the room while some of the discussion was taking place. But such as, that's the next item, so. See you later.
all right. All right. So this is, I think the 5th or 6th time that this has been brought forward, so we'll go again. Basically, the issue is when, in January of 2016, when I was charged with putting together a contract with the new firm because Mr. Copeland was retiring, I was asked to put together a cautious and reasonable contract. And so I looked at the general amount of time that had been spent discussing general issues, general counsel issues, and put together the idea of approximately $30,000 a year is what it looked like to match approximately the same number of hours that were being used by the previous firm, looking at the rate for this firm, and then giving it a little bit of extra cushion for getting up to speed, basically, for a new firm that would have to become familiar with the needs of the agency. And that was never including special projects or anything that might come up. And the discussion was basically recycled water or anything, because those were the things that were on our radar at the time, that I would come back to the board and ask for additional expenditure under the contract if and when we got to the point where we needed additional counsel for something special. Obviously, since that time, things have changed. There have been some issues that have come up, not the least of which is we started doing 2 meetings a month, which of course are 2 agendas that have to be reviewed by the attorney, and 2 meetings for him to attend, plus special meetings. Obviously, the lawsuit stipulated agreement work that has been done. We have the spills that we've been working with and getting legal guidance on how to interact with the state and the regional water board with regards to those events. We've had a couple of fairly significant Public Records Act requests that I needed guidance on to make sure that we were fully in compliance. And there was also a special project with pass-through expenses for specialized attorneys' fees that occurred last year. So none of that was within what I envisioned when I did the initial 3-year contract with an average of about $30,000. And so for this staff report, it was approximately $74,000, and then the amount that you just approved is another $11,000. So we are now at $85,000 on a $90,000 contract, and we're not 2 years in.
There's something I don't understand. under fiscal impact says the fiscal impact of amending the contract is $100,000 for FY 2017-18. But then in the middle of the paragraph under background and discussion and report, it says that it's 3 years for a total amount not to exceed $90,000.
No, the original contract was a $90,000 contract for 3 years.
Okay.
The impact of the additional amount that I'm asking for is $100,000. That is based on some general understanding of what we would need to deal with the issues that are on our plate right now.
But the way fiscal impact is written, it implies that that's $100,000 all in this fiscal year. And more than
Yes.
implies, it basically says that.
Yes, because the assumption is that's how much we would need to cover what we anticipate happening this year. And then I would need to come back based on what, because it's a not to exceed, if we were to need additional expenditure authority for next fiscal year, I would come back. My hope is that much of what is on our plate right now would be resolved this year. And so it would give us a much better idea what we would need to have to get us through the remainder of that contract, keeping in mind the board would want to revisit, are we still going to continue to have 2 meetings? Are we going to go back to 1 meeting? If there something with the lawsuit, if Sam does not have much interaction in that, so the expenditures might be lower. If we're able to resolve the issues fairly quickly with the state, we wouldn't have as much, we wouldn't have as many meetings, which means less billable hour from the firm. So all of this is assuming that most of those discussions are going to happen this fiscal year. So I would anticipate needing the majority of that money this fiscal year.
The way the staff report is written, it makes it difficult to see this, but you're talking about the difference between $30,000 a year and adding $100,000 on top of this year's $30,000.
Yes. It's an additional
That should have
100,000.
been clearer in the staff report.
Well, it's an additional 100,000. It's an estimate because at this point in time, I do not have enough information to tell you what that full 3-year contract is going to be. Because the issue is that will get us through this year based on what I'm seeing. If it's not necessary, there may not be additional funding needed for next year. I mean, that may cover just the normal amount that we expected. 30,000 may be fine for next year, which means the increase is just this year. The whole contract is a not to exceed 190,000 for that 3-year period, but I expect the bulk of that to get spent this year, which is why I put the impact in this fiscal year. I do anticipate it being mostly in this year.
All right, so based on past observations of the fire district, I think we need to amend the budget. And the staff report doesn't say where this money would come from.
Well, amending the budget, since we don't even have an adopted budget,
We
is...
do have an adopted.
No, we did not. We did not adopt the budget. We have a signed agreement. That is not the same thing.
Didn't this board?
You have the authorization under the stipulation to act as if the budget had been authorized.
Correct.
But haven't they?
So for all intents and purposes, I believe Director Warren's point is, we've all agreed, that budget is there. We can be
Right.
careful, artful with our language, but
Yes.
now back to your point.
Yes, I will have...
Well, hang on.
The point specifically is, Montero approved the budget, Redot approved the budget, Halfway approved the budget under protest, but that's still a budget approval, and then it came back to this board, I'm pretty sure we approved the budget.
Your question is, where's the 100 come from?
Right.
And what I anticipate is I will also have to do an amendment to what we anticipated the budget being this year because of the action by the state. And so I would like to bring that back all at once when I know what that number is, rather than piecing and parting it to the member agencies. And so I anticipate that somewhere in the vicinity of January or February, sort of a mid-year budget amendment is what I will prepare, because by then I hope to have a much better idea of what that total amount could potentially be.
All right, let me be a little clearer. member agencies have already set their assessments. I think it'd be very difficult to change the monthly assessments in the middle of a SAM budget year, and so which SAM account would the money be transferred from to pay this increase in this account?
We have options, right? We can draw from reserves, we can shift from a budgeted item to this, or we can go back out to the member agencies and ask the member agencies to come
Right.
up with the money.
And I would like to prepare all of that together with also dealing with the ACL from the Regional Water Board, so that we're not having to bring it to the
But as-
member agencies multiple
But
times.
as we're contemplating this, we need to have some idea in mind of where, if we approve this, where the money would come from, and we need to talk about that now.
What I would request is that we draw down from the operating reserve to cover this for now, until we know what
Can
the,
you remind us how much is in the reserve right now?
it's 2 months' worth of expenditures, so it's in excess of the 100,000.
So that's now been replenished because you have the, all of the current fiscal year payments from the member agencies.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right, back to this agenda item then. Is there a motion?
I think we're gonna need some discussion if we're gonna
Okay.
miss my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like a little bit of clarification on the $7,104 for the stipulated agreement.
Yes.
Is that the same amount of money that we agreed on in item,
The disbursements?
yes?
No, this was what had been paid, the staff report says this was as of July 31st. Now you have approved basically the August payment, which was an additional $4,000.
So this is July, which we have not approved of.
No, July has already been paid.
So,
Yep.
so what is this for? I'm sorry.
This was everything that we had as of July 31st, subsequent to this staff report, and because this is what went to a previous board meeting, and we just never had an opportunity to finalize it. We processed the August invoice, which is what you just approved tonight. It's an additional $11,000, $4,000 of which is specifically related to the stipulation in order. So that was where I said at the beginning of my discussion that now the total expense, rather than being $73,714, is $85,258. Because I didn't put that in there because you hadn't authorized it yet. But with item 6B and authorizing those payments, the full amount of what has been authorized for payment to this firm is approximately $85,000, of which approximately $11,000 was related to that stipulation and order process, facilitating it, working through it, all the discussions related to it.
Total billing 85,
258, yeah, 85.
85, and of that 11.
11,000 for discussions around the stipulation.
Right.
Yes.
And we have invoices for that as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like with the checks that were presented today, at the July meeting, when they were presented, the invoices were attached for that.
Debbie?
Yeah, so I just want to make it clear that we cannot vote to approve Bold's participation in a defense in the Halfman Bay lawsuit going forward. So any of those invoices have to come out. And we need to understand what the special projects are. I certainly understand the issue of the, working with the regional board, have no problem with that. The twice monthly meetings, Public Records Act request, but it would be a conflict for us to authorize expenditures on Bold for representing Sam, because we believe Sam's not an actual party to the lawsuit, so we could not pay for those expenses.
So I think what we've seen Carl doing for us is facilitating the process. And were Sam to be participating in trying to make the case or whatever, when we finally get down to it, I think there'd be a whole lot of visibility into that. But right now, it's just been about trying to facilitate the funding, and I think the work that he's done on that has gotten us to where we can sit down around the table and get some work done.
Yeah, I understand the need for the STIP, his work on the STIP, because it's
Right.
about getting the budget,
I'm
you
just,
know,
I'm
paid.
just imagining
I'm just talking about
if,
prospectively,
Sure.
we cannot pay his cost of defending,
I've got some wording that might
Against.
help us on that. If, I would like to see, you know, me personally, I would like to see Sam be able to do what it needs to do as we come upon it. But I think for getting through this, and, you know, we clearly have, this is a high legal expense year for all these reasons that Beverly's put together for us. More for the spills than for any other thing. So I want to try to put out there some language that might get us some additional funding, but alleviate the concern about funding going towards the defense of the case. Let me just mention a caveat. We'll just have to take it up later. I don't think we're going to get it done tonight. But if there are depositions or subpoenas or whatever comes up for trying to prep for the case, and Sam has to prepare a bunch of materials or spend a lot of time testifying or whatever, somebody's going to have to pay for that, and we'd be fools to do that without an attorney. And I would think at that point we could all see the obvious necessity for that, because that's administrative, but it requires someone who has the skill and training to do that. But we're not talking about that tonight, and
that should be a separate budget. Anything to do with the representation on the Half Moon Bay lawsuit needs to be a separate budget.
You
Allow
mean-
us to approve a
you
budget
mean-
for
you
everything
mean
else.
separate account or budget line item.
Yeah, so I don't want them lumped together.
Right.
I don't want this $100,000
tracked
to
separately.
cover all these things.
Right.
So
So-
you need a motion to approve X dollars for
So
everything else,
Let me try
and
this.
X dollars for
And
defense, because we can't vote for that.
Let me read this to you and see what you think, and then we can finesse it to get to where we want. Move that the board authorize the general manager to amend the contract with blah blah for legal services to increase the amount by whatever amount we decide, for a total contract amount of whatever we decide, and to limit the use of the additional funds for general legal advice and work related to administrative civil liability complaint R2 2017-1024, the regional board. We should probably just say regional board activities or something, but, because I think there are some other numbered matters that we might want to sweep in under that. But we'll see. None of the additional funds are to be used for Sam's participation in the lawsuit between Half Moon Bay, Granada, GCSD, and MWSD. Does that contemplate what you're looking for?
I think that
looks
sounds good.
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds fine.
All right. I think there are going to be those administrative necessities that we all know are going to have to be there if this thing proceeds. And if we, you know, depositions, documentation, preparation, all of that.
We'll need to deal with that as it comes up.
Exactly. But let me telegraph that now, make sure we're all
Yep.
thinking that's a possibility, so we don't come back later and say, we didn't anticipate that. But,
Sounds good.
okay, so that's my motion.
Um,
If we're ready to do that, oh, we need to pick amounts.
Right.
I
Well-
also need to know about the special project and pass-through expenses. What does that refer to?
There was a request for a special attorney advice that Carl managed through his firm. Special legal advice, so he contracted with an outside legal counsel to perform some work.
Concerning
Is
what?
that something that I know about?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay.
So basically, I think I know what the structure is without actually knowing what you're talking about. The structure is that he hired a special counsel essentially as a consultant to him.
Yes.
So he billed Sam, and then out of that billing, he paid the special counsel.
Right.
And that was
Okay.
necessary, that was
All right,
necessary.
so let's talk about amount. Beverly is asking for 100, which would take us to the end of January in January of 2019, I believe, is what the contract
Yeah.
runs to. So that's really, what, 16 months? something like that.
So, isn't that long already? Gee, how time flies.
I know.
Having fun.
So that would just give us some headroom. It's a not to exceed, and we've got things scoped to basically, I think, if we gave her the 100 and said, look, use this well, because you don't want to have to come back to us before the end of the contract again, for other than what we know we're going to may have to deal with for the spills. I would suggest we give, approve 100 since it's been kind of.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I wanna add on a not to exceed an amount. I think if we leave it at 100, I'm happy with that.
So this is the 100 additional on the amount that we started with, so that would take us to 190, where we had started. Honestly, I don't know, 90 for 3 years was ambitious in any circumstance.
We were supposed to cut back on
No,
the general stuff, and in the past, I don't know about with Beverly, but with the two managers before Beverly, the agency staff, the in-house staff was leaning much too hard on the attorney.
Well, we
way
went
too
for
much.
a parsimonious budget, and now this year is anything, that's just a little tight. So, so my motion, let me go ahead and put this on the table. I move that the board authorize the general manager to amend the contract with Bold, Pulsner, Maddow, Nelson, and Judson for legal services to increase the amount by $100,000 for a total contract amount of $190,000, and to limit the use of the additional funds for general legal advice and work related to administrative civil liability complaint R2 2017-1024 and associated matters. Is that good enough?
Associated matters.
Well, let's find some good language. How
Needs to
about
be
administrative
related,
civil
yeah.
liability complaints? Period. Not cite the specific one, because we know we've got the 5 spills.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. None of the additional funds are to be used for Sam's participation in the lawsuit between Half Moon Bay, Granada Community Services District, and Montero Water and Sanitary District.
I'll second that.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And would you be
well,
willing to email me the motion, just so I can share that with mine?
Yeah.
Okay, before you had this not to exceed
Would you email it to me?
100,000, right?
I'll send that to everybody.
Okay, and Dr. Penrose, your reason for not wanting to have it not to exceed 100,000, what was the reason behind that?
I thought we were talking about an additional 90,000 over the 190,000.
No, we're talking about an additional 100 over the original.
No, I understand that now.
Yeah.
I was,
Okay, but
So it's
we want to keep
190,000 total from start to
Total.
finish,
not to exceed.
not to exceed, which means it's not a free-for-all, it's if and when as needed, not to exceed that amount.
That's a protection for us.
Right,
Yes.
because that allows me to pick up the phone and call him if I need to without having to come back to the board and say, I need to talk to Carl for 2 hours.
But the protection for us is also that Beverly and Carl both know there's a budget, so
Yeah.
don't just burn it.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
have
To be
use it
very
well.
cautious in the use of it.
Right.
So not to exceed means don't come back to us.
Right, unless there's something else that is beyond my control.
Okay.
Okay? All right,
All right.
then
You
Moved
vote.
and seconded.
it was Boyd and Dr. Penrose.
Yeah.
vote?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Amen.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
All right.
Scott,
let me-
thank you for that due diligence.
Okay, so
Yeah, that was well done.
Let me go get,
Thank you.
does that mean that 7B is moot?
Let's ask Carl.
No,
'Cause he can
7B
come back in
is
the room now.
an entirely different issue, I thought.
Well, I think some of it was, how could we do some of this if we couldn't come up with a little bit of money for Carl? But he was the one who recommended 7B as a fallback,
Right.
Plan B.
We'll say one thing, it's cooler out in the park.
it is. And we've tried opening the doors before, but then we get the bug invasion because of the
Yeah.
lights.
Oh, I know.
So, and that doesn't work out very well. So,
7B.
7B,
Okay.
is that moot?
Well, seven B, yeah, it could be moot. I mean, it would.
How about 8A?
Yeah.
Seven B, I'm not sure exactly what happened in here, so I have some idea.
We
but-
upped the amount of the contract by 100,000 to a total of 190, not to
Oh.
exceed to the end of the term.
Yeah.
And if 7B is moot, I recommend we move on to 8A.
What? You
Li-
told most of the
limited.
motion, you wanna tell them the last part?
Oh, nothing to be spent on the lawsuit
Okay.
under that. I think though, while we're here and talking about it, think about it, the work done on the stipulation, those kind of ministerial things, what do we wanna do?
Can we address it as it comes up?
Do we have any impending things in front of the court where we need to do paperwork and simple motions?
The next thing that I would want to do on Sam's behalf is to circulate a stipulation, I don't feel the need to draft it, that would say, I don't have to file an answer on behalf of Sam to the cross complaints of the two districts. Just the same as I didn't file one to the complaint filed with the city.
Yeah. so
That
that
way I
this gets in the
cannot
gray area.
have to take a position on factual allegations and that sort of thing.
So it's a nullity, right? So you can,
Yeah, I mean, what we said in the stipulation that the court approved was, that's our responsive pleading. Because otherwise we have to admit or deny and
So
that
if
sort
you-
of thing.
so let's leave it at this. If you see an upcoming need, then we should put it on the next possible agenda and
Okay.
talk about it.
Yeah.
I think,
Yes.
honestly, the stipulation, I wanna reiterate, I gotta tell you, when I first heard about your initiative on that, I flinched. I didn't much care for the notion right off the bat. But it has been quite efficacious, and I'm very happy that you took that initiative, and I think it was a low-cost way to get us to where we can keep the agency moving. I know there's a lot of people who are breathing easier because paychecks, bills getting paid, it's all good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, new business, item 8A, discuss and consider approving proposed purchasing policy.
Yes, so part of what came up in the audit from this past year, not the year we just ended, but the 15-16 year, was that the policies and procedures that we had are outdated and they don't match what we're actually doing. And especially after implementing the new software, it doesn't match how that software works. So the recommendation from the auditor was that we start reviewing our policies to get them to match our function.
Okay.
And putting it all in one place in a policy makes it difficult because in the current policy is just one giant policy. So really what makes sense for us is to deal with sort of each concept as a separate policy. And so purchasing is one concept of the financial operations. This purchasing policy I have utilized elsewhere. It's a conglomeration of draft policies that other agencies have submitted to CSMFO, CSDA, various agencies, so that those agencies can have the benefit of those policies being beat up by other lawyers. And it really is also designed with the concept of transparency that CSDA has been advocating for, so that special districts are operating in the most transparent way possible. And so this policy I'm putting forward, as far as the levels of authority, it's the same as it was under the resolution, but it's really more of a policy document. So it says this is how we'll go about doing this. It also envisions that we will move away from paper purchase orders to electronic purchase orders, so that there's an audit trail through the software system, as opposed to a piece of paper that gets passed around.
So this looks like a complete replacement rather than an update.
That's of this particular issue, yes.
So there's no practical way for you to describe what the changes are.
Trying to go back to that entire financial policies and procedures document, as well as the two resolutions that are referenced, it wasn't a strikeout kind of a situation. I can tell you, once again, the biggest changes are making sure that it refers to positions that exist now, as opposed to positions that existed back then, titles, job descriptions, things like that, as well as making sure that the process that we go through matches the expectation that the member agencies and the public have for transparent procedures. The dollar amounts should match what was already in the resolution as far as what a department supervisor has authority to do, what the manager has to do, and what has to go to the board, and also what is compliant with California Contract Code for Public Works.
I'd like to know which employees currently have credit cards and if that's gonna change.
The only employees that have credit cards are the 3 manager level and the manager. So it's Kishan, Tim, and Kathy, and me. Now, we do have charge accounts at local vendors here, but they have a list of employees that are able to go and they have their signatures on file. So if maintenance needs something, they can go to the Ace Hardware store.
I kinda think the board and the public need more visibility on those, and what I would like to see, depending on the reaction of the rest of the directors, is as part of the monthly revenue and expenses agenda item, that the detail for all the credit card purchases be included.
I thought they were doing that. It didn't get included.
It's in the stack of checks.
I was gonna say, so you
But
want it
you're
scanned
talking about
into
in
the.
And I want it in the packet so the public has easy
Sure.
access to it, and so all the directors, not just the ones signing the checks, have easy access.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Okay, any directors have any questions, requested changes, anything?
So you're saying the dollar amounts on page 68 are the same as what we previously approved?
It should be, yes. I tried to match it, so
You said
it
should.
was, it should be, I would hope so. So basically saying, it doesn't say oral and written because, once again, we're trying to move to an electronic software system that, we can put that in there, but that it should be the 10,000, so the board of directors shall retain the authority to approve in advance purchases for materials, supplies, and equipment exceeding 30,000 per vendor per fiscal year, and 15,000 for capital projects.
Oh, hang on a second, so attachment C starts on what page?
It starts on 72,
Okay, all right.
policy, yeah.
The policy itself, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And so basically, the breakdown is that Sam can expend funds for O&M purchases up to 30,000 per vendor per fiscal year. Capital, it's 15,000 because that's the contracting requirement. Employee benefits are basically as approved in the MOU because they're already adopted as part of that. And that the board has the authority and must approve purchases for materials, supplies, and equipment that exceed 30,000 per vendor per fiscal year, and contracts for capital replacement and improvement projects exceeding 15,000. Once again, that's the public contract code.
There's no tabular summary like there is in the current policy.
You're talking about in the resolution?
The table on 68,
Right.
That's why everybody likes tables now.
well, yeah, I assume this is, scrolling through, I thought this is what we were looking to approve, and you're saying that what we're looking to approve starts on 72,
Right,
and there's about 20 pages of that,
yes.
but there's no summary table to match what we had on 68.
Page 72 says the purchasing authority, and it says supplies and equipment up to 10,000 per vendor per fiscal, try that again, per vendor per fiscal year, and 5,000 per vendor per fiscal year for services. That's basically the same level of,
It would be super helpful to have a summary table, going through all the pros to try to get this. I mean, among other things, not only for staff to be able to see it at a glance, but also for the public. I don't expect the public to have to go through and read every paragraph.
Yeah, I agree with you, totally.
I mean, it would just summarize what we already see here.
Okay. And also with the electronic version, it's going to be able to block it out. So if somebody submitted something and it was in excess of that, it wouldn't allow it to happen.
Council has a comment.
Well, the one thing I was gonna suggest, I think the information that you're talking about is in the pages that immediately precede the policies. And it's possible the board could say that whole thing is what we're approving. I mean, it's just an idea.
The
If
table
that
on
doesn't work, it
The
doesn't
table on
work.
68 has different job titles.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, it's not that different, but
Okay.
let me suggest, I don't mind approving this provisionally with that a
Lifting
table
this
like
and-
this
yep.
gets in there. And then
Yes.
this obviously gives you a starting point, but it shouldn't be that hard to pull out. It's just,
I can do that.
I agree, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, so Beverly, that going to this new system, one of the features is you're transitioning from a sort of a manual purchase orders and all of the work that entails to an electronic version. Okay, that within the scope of that, how burdensome is the overhead of all these procedures? In other words, do we have a $10 solution to a $2 problem?
No, the problem is right now, the paper mechanism requires somebody to track what's been spent on the purchase order because it's just a piece of paper. So, for example, if we've got a purchase order for $25,000 and the work is being done intermittently throughout the year on a blanket purchase order, somebody has to be tracking that on a spreadsheet.
Okay, so the electronic version in essence deals with the complexity of this procedure so that as a day-to-day operational thing, this procedure is not burdensome.
Yes, because it's already burdensome because it's all paper driven.
Right.
And this makes it more clear because at any given time, for example, I put in a blanket purchase order for $30,000 for legal services. At any given time, it's easy for me to see what's already been expended. And it's not just me, I manage this contract, but anybody can look who has access to the system.
So it's populating accounts automatically.
Yes,
And it's going against the budget automatically.
yes, it's encumbering as it goes.
So that your day-to-day work is just basically read the reports.
Yes, and it also prevents us from inadvertently going over budget. Because if there are two separate purchase orders and two different people are managing them, there's no cross-reference unless we keep track of it via a separate spreadsheet. This way it'll be in the system and you can see right away by running a report based on vendor.
Okay, so you feel it's very, very consistent with both transparency and accountability.
Very much so.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion? Let everybody jump in at once.
I move that we approve the proposed purchasing policy.
I'll second, with the understanding that we're asking for a table to summarize as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Meaning.
Something approximately similar to what's on page 68 of
You
tonight's
just,
packet.
Right.
you can just look at
In
it.
addition to what's currently.
Right.
Yes.
Sounds good. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Did you get a chance to watch Tip of the
Okay.
8B, discuss order of business for regular board meetings and adopt resolution 14-2017, accepting the changes in superseding resolution 7-2017.
This was basically as a request from Director Warren, who wanted to simplify the laundry list of items that was in the resolution. At the time, we were just discussing continuing 2 meetings a month or 1 meeting a month, and staff said that they would bring it back with a recommendation for simplifying. This was the language that Director Warren recommended that the board consider. Primarily, it's collapsing old and new business into just regular business.
And eliminating all the stuff that's a restatement of other overriding laws.
Right,
like the Brown Act. and-
Yeah.
yeah, because it's already,
And to some extent, the JPA too.
yeah, it's already there, those documents already exist.
So what's the downside of leaving those procedures in?
It's just duplicative.
Yeah,
It's just what?
It's duplicative. It's,
Clutter.
there's no reason to say it twice. And in fact, if we do say it twice and the wording's not exactly right or the same, then we wind up having to resolve.
it creates confusion.
Confusion.
And it really, if you have it really clear here, then the document is really purpose-built for what it's talking about.
Okay.
The Brown Act is the Brown Act, the JEPA is the JEPA.
Except that until one of the two of you got here, we always called it the JPA agreement.
Yeah,
Bunch of revisionists.
yeah.
Originalists,
Word
whatever.
exercise is.
I'd like to move that we adopt
Oh,
resolution
the-
14-2017, accepting the changes in superseding resolution 7-2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do we have one board meeting?
That's two, that's two.
Do we have one board meeting?
Okay, so that was
That's good.
moved by Reddick and seconded by Penrose is what I have.
Been moved and seconded, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Item 9A, received manager's report for August 2017.
You have the report, I'm not gonna go through it, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Anyone have any questions?
Nope.
Item 9B, email from Sabrina Brennan regarding the resist density flyer. I actually got a copy of essentially that letter before it showed up here.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that they are
so did staff have comments on this?
intentionally twisting things. Yes. What does
So,
staff,
I
what does
would-
staff have to say?
Yeah, so I received this directly from Ms. Brennan. I'm assuming since it's from her personal email account that it wasn't as a director from the Harbor District, it was her as a public member. And you can see the email there. She wanted to know if the data is accurate. I reviewed it, it appears, I'm not gonna recalculate all their figures, but it appears to have come directly from the information that was provided to the resist density attorney, which I had previously reported to the board that we received that public records request, I believe, in June. And so some of these spreadsheets are exactly ours, it's just data that we emailed over to them, and they've obviously taken it and compiled what their purpose was for it, and so I merely responded to her that without having to actually go back and perform the analysis for them, it appears to be accurate based on the data we provided. And she responded thanking me for that and saying that she was also including Mr. Lorenas on this, just having to do with, I would assume, Surfrider, his previous work with Surfrider and water quality issues related to that.
Okay,
So-
Debbie and then me.
Now, I have a question. Why is this
Debbie,
even,
Debbie.
sorry,
The other,
I don't know why we would respond to this request to verify information. It doesn't seem like an appropriate role for us, especially since she's using the phrase, is this information correct? When in the spreadsheet, it shows Magellan in Half Moon Bay.
Right.
And first of all, not sure it's in Half Moon Bay, and even if it is on that side of the border, it's not within the Half Moon Bay sanitary district, right, boundaries. So I think it's dicey for you to engage this, which might result in lawsuits, not necessarily on us or any of the districts, but other people, third parties.
I was thinking the very much similar thought.
Yeah.
I think though, you did mention, and you mentioned it a couple of times, that you said, without going back to do your work.
yes.
So that was gonna be my caution to throw in too. I would prefer that we not make any statement about the veracity of their work.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. I don't approve of that.
I agree too.
Yeah.
Then I just have one comment on that, is that goes for anyone who makes a public record request. who is acting in a personal capacity, because that has come up in the past where it was someone who was towing the line between an official request
Yeah.
from a member agency versus a public records request. I can't treat people
Well,
differently.
No, right, and
Yeah.
I think, look, I mean, was the data you provided to us correct? Well, to our best belief and understanding, yeah, it's correct, but that has to be the case at the point where we give it to you.
Mhm.
And what they do with it,
Exactly.
that's fine.
We don't wanna be roped
So-
into
so
something.
the-
Beverly Marshall said it was correct.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they were
Right.
essentially asking for an opinion from Sam as to whether the analysis of the data was correct.
And I did not confirm nor deny that that
Right.
was correct.
Right, and it's not
That's
our
good.
job to
Yeah,
do
this-
that. If there was something interesting for the board to consider,
Mhm.
if they raised an issue that was
Mhm.
worthy of our discussion, then I would welcome that kind of discussion.
But that's a different matter
It
altogether.
is,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
is.
I merely was confirming that this data was provided.
Now, the,
That's all I was saying.
This looks familiar, Your Honor.
This looks familiar.
the
But there's always a
analysis,
caveat that there could be mistakes.
Yeah.
the analysis of the data that they did, which is what you have here, is intentionally misleading on their part, because the vast majority of the spills were very minor, on the order of a few hundred to a small number of thousand gallons. The vast majority of them did not reach surface waters. And so by going just on the sheer number of spills, they're trying to make a case that isn't there, because they want to stop a development that can't be stopped.
That's immaterial to
Yeah.
the reasons
Yeah.
in front of us, right?
They're
This-
making us look bad
Yeah.
in a way that's inappropriate and,
Yeah, I
I'm gonna
agree.
say inaccurate.
But we can't
agree.
control their analysis,
No.
we can only control what we give
But
them.
we could have responded that your analysis is misleading because of the.
But they
reasons I
didn't
just
send it to me.
stated.
They did not send it, Resist Density did not send it to me. Ms. Brennan did and
Right.
wanted to know, and that's why I clearly stated, without going back and recalculate it, which I'm not going to do, because that's not my role.
Right.
There
That's
may
it.
be an opportunity for us to consider how we might take the same information and put it out there in context. I take your
I think
point.
that would
was
be
my
a good
first-
idea,
That was
actually.
my first thought.
Get it
when
on
I-
the website.
When I first saw it, and I haven't taken the time to study it all the way through, but immediately I'm thinking, well, that number sounds right in terms of incidents, but it doesn't, there are many pages to their thing, and some of it slices and dices and breaks
Yes.
it down, and so I don't wanna be too critical of it, but that initial impression on page 1 or 2,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's,
The other thing is, with something like this, for me, I might have said, maybe I'll call Carl and just see, is there any legal sensitivity here? What am I
Mhm.
getting myself into by responding? Just,
So
Asking
once
that
again, let me point out that I have done that in the past, and to use the vernacular, I've gotten my hand slapped twice. Which
It's
is,
a routine request.
well,
Right.
I think we're all saying, look,
Yeah.
this could bear some liability or consequences that are unintended. Even by the party asking for our thoughts on it. It could put us in a position that we didn't intend or even contemplate was happening. Where we put our neck on the line is when we provide the data under the Public Records Act request, right? The Act dictates what our obligations are. If someone wants to find out, we could refer them to the data that was provided. In fact, we could provide the same data to them so they could do their own analysis.
yes, I think that's right.
And
yeah.
I would say, as a director, if someone wants to sit down over coffee and see if the context is what I personally might agree to, I'm happy to do that. Feel free to mention to somebody. I bet a bunch of us would be willing to, but as an agency, I don't know, I think we want to be circumspect, and I agree. I'm with Debbie on this. Ask Carl.
and just so you know, that the circumstance
I'm
that
just
came
saying,
up
you're
before,
hearing
I was
some-
told definitively the opposite,
We're
which.
on tape.
Right.
Alright, so,
And that's the only thing I wanted
This
to
is-
point out, is
so
that
you're
I will treat all requests from the public in the same fashion.
fair enough.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Alright,
However, I don't think that all Public Records Act requests need to be reviewed by council. I think, the vast majority of them should be very straightforward, and you look at it and you say, yeah, that's a non-issue, we can just supply the documents.
However, there is
Here's the
always,
thing, I'm gonna comment on that. I mean, she's a general manager, she's a professional.
Right.
And if she deems that there's a reason to ask counsel, well, yeah, I think that's her call.
Right, but
You know,
the reason I mention
By
it is
the
I
way,
think,
very well said.
I think
Yeah.
at some time in the past, all of them were run past council, and I know at the Harbor District, they run every trivial Public Records Act request through council.
Yeah, no, that's.
no, I definitely err on the side of caution, and once again, to use the vernacular, I've had my hand slapped. So therefore, I would like to say that as a broad statement, I use my best judgment. I pick up the phone or send an email to council if I believe that this could be a sticky wicket, or if I think that there's something I might not be seeing, but I'm going to treat all public records requests the same, in the sense of I'm not going to give deference depending on who is asking.
Believe me, this one's a sticky wicket.
Yeah.
So, I think you're seeing consensus from the
Yes.
board tonight, and
Thank you
there you go.
very much.
Fine.
Item 10, attorney's reports.
Well, we talked a little bit in closed session. I'm not obviously gonna repeat any of that. Other than that, all I can say is the legislative season has come to an end, and I don't know how the governor's doing, because he doesn't put out press releases quite as often as I'd like to know what he's doing with some of the bills.
He has until the 15th of October.
You might check
That
Twitter,
sounds
you
right.
never know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and
Take
certainly,
your time.
certainly if we get updates, I mean, I get a lot of stuff through CSDA and some of the other agencies, CASA and such. I know Carl certainly is in the know. When we get those, we forward them.
And
to the
there's
board.
you can get email notification if you sign up at leginfo.ca.gov.
Yeah, and I do. So, yes.
Item 11, director's reports.
Donna.
Item 12, topics for future board discussion.
Just to point out that we do have this ever-growing spreadsheet of items that we are endeavoring to get through. And we will continue to work our way through them. Some of them got bumped because of some of the discussions we had throughout the months of July and August regarding the budget, but I think we're back on track, and we will hopefully be working our way through some of these. Certainly if someone has something that you would like me to add so that the board could consider it, if you just send me an email, then I can add it onto this so that I can get direction from the board.
I actually find these helpful, even if there's repeats from meeting to meeting.
Some recent past general manager eliminated this. We did it for quite a number of years.
Yeah,
We're gonna be getting into the swing of this too with the city.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I think it might be helpful at the next meeting is to have a report on winter preparations, the winter is coming report.
Yeah, we usually, I won't say usually, we used to get such a report from Tony.
All right.
A little something.
So while everybody's here, I got a question.
This is usually direct deposit.
Something here regarding inspections, where am I? I guess I'm in the monthly manager's report, is signed by Rick Heaslett. Any relationship to some past SAM director named Bill Heaslett?
I have absolutely no idea.
I
Anybody
think
know?
it's spelled differently.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay. Anything else, or are we ready to adjourn?
Yes.
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 Okay,
All
we're
right.
adjourned.
Woo-hoo. Thank you very much.
Let's do it together.